The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop outside Coolidge, Kansas, throwing Hannah Adams face first into the dusty floor and sending her carpetbag tumbling out the door into a patch of prairie grass that looked like it had surrendered to the relentless sun weeks ago. She scrambled out after it, her traveling dress already gray with road dust, and stood there breathing hard while the driver cursed at his horses, and the other passengers pushed past her without so much as a word of concern. It was September 1878, and Hannah had exactly $3.42 to her name, no family waiting for her, and a letter of reference from a Philadelphia household that she suspected would mean absolutely nothing this far west. The town sprawled before her like something a child might have built and then abandoned halfway through. Weathered buildings lined a single main street, their false fronts reaching optimistically toward a sky so blue it hurt to look at. A saloon stood on one corner, its painted sign faded beyond legibility. Across from it, a general store advertised supplies in hand-lettered words that had started to peel. A few townspeople moved about their business, glancing at her with mild curiosity before turning away. Hannah picked up her carpetbag, brushed off what dust she could, and walked toward what looked like it might be a boarding house. The woman who answered her knock was thin as a rail and just as hard, with eyes that assessed Hannah from head to foot in approximately 3 seconds. Looking for lodging. $2 a week, meals included, payment in advance. Hannah's stomach tightened. At that rate, she would be penniless in less than 2 weeks. Is there work available in town? I am experienced in household management, cooking, and general domestic service. The woman's expression softened slightly, though it did not exactly become warm. Might be work at one of the ranches. Bar W Ranch is the biggest operation around here. They are always needing help of one kind or another, though what kind of help they need shifts with the seasons. You could ride out there and ask. It is about 6 miles northwest. I do not have a horse. Then you walk, girl. Nothing worth having comes easy out here. The woman started to close the door, then paused. Tell you what, you pay me for 3 nights. That gives you enough time to find work or move on. If you get hired at Bar W, Frank Waters is honest enough. He will see you right. Hannah counted out the money, watching her meager savings dwindle to almost nothing. The room she was shown to was tiny, with a narrow bed and a single window that overlooked the alley, but it was clean. She sat on the bed and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to feel the full weight of her situation. Then she unpacked her few belongings, washed her face and hands in the basin, changed into her least dusty dress, and set out to learn what she could about Bar W Ranch and Frank Waters. The general storekeeper was more talkative than the boarding house proprietor. He was a round man with spectacles that kept sliding down his nose, and he seemed genuinely pleased to have someone new to talk to. Bar W, fine ranch. They run about 3,000 head of cattle, got maybe 20 hands working there regular, more during roundup and drives. Frank Waters is the foreman. Been running things there for near about 10 years. The owner lives back east somewhere, leaves everything to Frank. Good man, fair man, works harder than any 3 men put together and expects the same from his crew. What about domestic staff? The storekeeper scratched his chin. Well now, that has always been a bit of a problem out there. Being so far from town, it is hard to keep anyone. Cowboys do their own cooking most of the time, or whoever drew the short straw does it. I hear tell the food out there could be used to sole boots. He chuckled at his own joke. If you got skills in the kitchen, Frank would probably weep with joy to see you. Hannah spent the rest of that day gathering information and planning. She bought a canteen and some hard biscuits with her last dollar, and the next morning she set out before dawn, walking northwest along the wagon road that led to Bar W Ranch. The September morning was cool, almost cold, but she knew the afternoon would be brutal. She walked steadily, her carpetbag growing heavier with each mile. The sun was high and punishing when she finally saw the ranch buildings shimmer into view across the prairie. The main house was substantial, built of wood with a wide porch that wrapped around at least two sides. Behind it, a bunkhouse, several barns, corrals, and various outbuildings spread across the landscape. Cattle dotted the distant hills, and she could see several horses in the nearest corral. As she approached, two dogs came running toward her, barking enthusiastically but not aggressively. A moment later, a man emerged from one of the barns. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that strained the fabric of his work shirt. His hair was dark, touched with dust, and his face was tanned the deep brown of someone who spent every waking hour outdoors. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin and his own domain. When he saw her, he stopped, said something to the dogs that made them quiet, and walked toward her. "Help you, miss." His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that suggested he had not always lived in Kansas. "I am looking for Frank Waters. My name is Hannah Adams. I am seeking employment." He studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes taking in her travel-worn appearance, the carpetbag, the determination in her stance despite the obvious exhaustion. "I am Frank Waters. What kind of employment?" "Domestic service. Cooking, cleaning, household management. I have 7 years of experience in a prominent Philadelphia household. I have a letter of reference." She started to reach for her bag, but he waved it away. "Can you really cook? Not talking about fancy city food. I mean cook for hungry men who have been working since before sunrise. I can cook anything you need me to cook. I was trained in a kitchen that served formal dinners for 30 guests. I believe I can manage meals for ranch hands." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "It is past noon, and the men will be coming in for dinner within the hour. Our regular cook quit 3 weeks ago. Since then, we have been taking turns, and I can tell you honestly that not one of us knows what we are doing. The biscuits this morning were harder than rocks. If you can prepare a meal for 22 men in the next hour, using whatever you find in that kitchen, I will hire you on the spot. If it is edible, you can stay as long as you want. If it is actually good, I will pay you double whatever you were making in Philadelphia." Hannah set down her carpetbag. "Show me the kitchen." The kitchen was a disaster. Dirty pans were stacked in a washtub, the stove was coated with grease and burned on food, and supplies were scattered across every surface in no discernible order. Hannah stood in the doorway for 5 seconds, assessing, then rolled up her sleeves. "I will need someone to bring me water. Several buckets, and to stoke that stove immediately." Frank called out, and a young man appeared, barely out of his teens, who stared at Hannah with wide eyes. "Billy, get the lady whatever she needs. Water, firewood, anything." Hannah moved through the kitchen like a general organizing troops. While Billy brought water and got the stove heating, she sorted through the supplies. There was salt pork, dried beans that looked like they had been soaking unevenly for days, flour, lard, some sorry-looking potatoes, and a few other staples. Not much to work with, but she had dealt with worse. She drained the beans, put them on to boil properly with salt pork and an onion she found in a basket. The potatoes were peeled, cut, and set to boiling in another pot. She mixed up biscuit dough, her hands working quickly and efficiently, and got them into the oven. There was coffee that looked like it had been sitting since breakfast, so she dumped it and started fresh. In 45 minutes, she had transformed the chaos into order. Frank returned just as she was pulling the biscuits out of the oven. They were golden brown, risen properly, and the smell alone made his eyes widen. "Good Lord," he said quietly. "The men should come in now. The food is ready." He went to the door and rang a bell that hung on the porch. Within minutes, men began arriving, washing up at the pump outside before filing into the dining room that adjoined the kitchen. Hannah heard their voices, the scrape of chairs, the rough laughter and conversation of men who worked hard together. She began bringing out platters of food, her face composed and professional despite her nerves. The talking stopped when she entered. 21 men stared at her, then at the food. She set down the platter of biscuits, went back for the beans and salt pork, then the potatoes she had mashed with butter and milk. The coffee followed. Then she stepped back into the kitchen and waited. The silence broke into a chaos of reaching hands and appreciative sounds. She heard someone say, "Lord have mercy, these are real biscuits." Another voice responded, "These beans actually taste like something." The sound of eating continued for several minutes before the conversation picked up again, this time with an energy that had been absent before. Frank appeared in the kitchen doorway. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes were warm. "The men would like to know your name so they can thank you properly." Hannah wiped her hands on a towel. "Hannah Adams. Miss Adams, would you come out here for a moment?" She followed him into the dining room. 21 pairs of eyes focused on her, and one by one the men stood. The gesture touched her more than she expected. The young man she now knew as Billy spoke first. "Miss Adams, that was the best meal we have had in months. Thank you." A chorus of agreement followed. Hannah felt her cheeks warm. "You are welcome. It was only simple food." "Simple food cooked right beats fancy food cooked wrong every time," said an older man with gray in his beard. "Madam, I hope you are planning to stay." Frank cleared his throat. "Miss Adams, I am a man of my word. You have proven you can cook for this crew and cook well. I would like to offer you permanent employment as the ranch cook. Room and board included, plus $60 a month. That is twice what I imagine you were making in Philadelphia. You would have a private room in the main house, Sundays off, and I promise you every man here will treat you with complete respect or answer to me. Do you accept?" $60 a month was more money than Hannah had ever made in her life. It was more than she had imagined making. She looked around the room at the expectant faces, then back at Frank. "I accept." The cheer that went up rattled the windows. Frank smiled, really smiled, and the transformation of his face took her breath away. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, but when he smiled, he was something more than that. "Welcome to Bar W Ranch, Miss Adams. Boys, get back to work. Miss Adams needs time to settle in and organize that kitchen properly." The men filed out, several of them thanking her again as they passed. Billy lingered. "Miss Adams, if you need anything carried or heavy work done, you just call for me, all right? I am happy to help." "Thank you, Billy, I will remember that." When they were gone, Frank showed her to her room. It was on the first floor of the main house, a decent-sized space with a real bed, a wardrobe, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the prairie. The house belonged to the original owner before he moved back east. Now it is mostly just offices and storage, plus this room. "My quarters are upstairs, completely separate. You will have privacy. The men sleep in the bunkhouse, of course. There is a lock on your door. Use it whenever you want." "This is more than adequate. Thank you, Mr. Waters." "Frank, everyone here uses first names. We are too busy for formality." "Then you should call me Hannah," he nodded. "Get yourself settled. Supper should be around 6 o'clock if that suits you. I will make sure Billy brings in enough firewood and water before then." He paused at the door. "Hannah, I meant what I said. You are safe here. Any man who forgets that will be out on his ear within the hour, no matter how good a worker he is." I believe you, Frank. After he left, Hannah sat on the bed and allowed herself a moment of relief so profound it made her dizzy. She had a job, a good job, a place to live. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia 6 weeks ago, she felt like she might actually survive this vast, lonely country. She unpacked her belongings, washed up, changed into a fresh dress, and went back to the kitchen. If she was going to cook for 22 people 3 times a day, she needed to understand what supplies were available and what needed to be ordered. She spent the next 2 hours cleaning and organizing, making lists, planning menus. Billy appeared periodically with firewood and water, always polite, always respectful. Frank stopped by as she was starting supper preparations. "What are you making?" "Stew. I found some beef in the cold cellar and enough vegetables to make it work. More biscuits. Apple cobbler for dessert if those apples in the barrel are still good." "You are making dessert?" He looked genuinely amazed. "The apples will spoil if they are not used. It seems wasteful not to." "Hannah, you are going to spoil these men terribly. They are going to start expecting things like edible food and desserts." She caught the teasing tone and smiled. "I will try not to set expectations too high." He lingered, leaning against the door frame, watching her work. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother taught me the basics." She was a good cook, very practical. When she died and I went into service at 15, the head cook at the Pemberton household took me under her wing. She was from France originally. She taught me that cooking is both art and science. You must understand the ingredients, the temperatures, the timing. You must care about the food you make and the people you make it for. Your mother would be proud of you." Hannah's hand stilled for a moment. "I hope so." She wanted better for me than service, but circumstances do not always allow for what we want. "What happened to the Pemberton household? Why did you come west?" She kept her eyes on the vegetables she was cutting. "The family fell on difficult financial times. They had to let most of the staff go. They gave me a good reference and a small severance. I had no family left in Philadelphia, nothing tying me there. I thought perhaps there would be opportunities out west, places where hard work mattered more than connections or social standing." "You thought correctly. Out here, no one cares where you came from. They care about what you can do and whether they can trust you." He straightened. "I will let you work. Thank you, Hannah. You have no idea what a difference this makes." Supper was as successful as dinner had been. The men ate with an enthusiasm that made all her work worthwhile, and the apple cobbler was received like she had served them gold. After the meal, she cleaned the kitchen while Billy helped by drying dishes and putting them away. He chattered cheerfully about the ranch, the other men, the work they did. "Frank is the best foreman in Kansas," Billy said proudly. "Maybe in all of the West. He knows cattle, horses, land, weather. He can track anything, fix anything, outwork anyone. The owner keeps trying to get him to take a percentage of the ranch, make him a partner, but Frank always says no. Says he prefers being foreman. I think he just does not want the paperwork." Billy grinned. "How long have you been working here?" 2 years. "I was 16 when I showed up looking for work. Green as grass, did not know one end of a cow from the other. Frank took me on anyway, taught me everything. He is a good man, Miss Adams, fair and decent. You will like working for him." Hannah was already beginning to think Billy might be right. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Hannah rose before dawn to start breakfast, served dinner at noon, and supper in the evening. Between meals, she cleaned, organized, planned menus, and requisitioned supplies. Frank took her into town once a week in the wagon so she could purchase what she needed from the general store. The storekeeper had been right about everything. Frank was fair, honest, and hardworking. He treated her with unfailing respect and courtesy, and he made sure every man on the ranch did the same. But there was something else, something neither of them spoke about. Hannah caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she was not looking. When their hands brushed accidentally, passing a plate or reaching for the same door, the contact felt electric. When he smiled at her, which he did more and more often, her heart did strange things in her chest. She told herself it was foolish. He was her employer. He was older than her, probably by 10 years at least, though she had not asked. He was a foreman with responsibilities and a reputation to maintain. She was a cook, a servant, nobody special. Nothing could come of this attraction, so she tried to ignore it. But ignoring Frank Waters was like trying to ignore a thunderstorm. His presence filled every space he entered. His voice carried a natural authority that made people listen. He was decisive, competent, and completely unafraid of hard work. She watched him break a wild horse one afternoon, his movements patient and sure, his voice calm as he worked with the frightened animal. She watched him settle a dispute between two ranch hands with a few quiet words that left both men looking ashamed of themselves. She watched him carry a bucket of water for her when she was struggling with it. Even though he had just worked a 12-hour day and looked exhausted, 3 weeks after her arrival, Frank invited her to sit on the porch after supper. It had become a habit of his to check in with her at the end of each day, asking if she needed anything, if the men were treating her well, if there were any problems. Tonight, though, something was different. He seemed restless, turning his hat over in his hands as he leaned against the porch railing. "Hannah, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. All right. Are you happy here? Is this what you wanted when you came west?" She considered the question carefully. "I am happier than I have been in a very long time. The work is hard, but it is satisfying. I feel useful here, appreciated. As for what I wanted, I am not sure I knew what that was. I think I was running away from something rather than toward something. But now that I am here, I cannot imagine being anywhere else." He nodded slowly. "Good. That is good. I want you to know that you can stay here as long as you want. Years if you want. This ranch runs better with you here. The men are happier, they work better, there is less complaining and fighting, and the food." He smiled. "Hannah, I have gained 10 pounds since you arrived, and I do not even care," she laughed. "I will take that as a compliment. It is meant as one." He hesitated, then continued. "I also want you to know that if you ever need anything, anything at all, you can come to me, not just ranch business, anything." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to feel safe here, secure. I want you to understand that you are not just an employee, you are part of this place now." Something in his voice made her pulse quicken. "Frank, is something wrong?" "No, I just needed to say it." He put his hat back on and turned to go, then stopped. "Hannah, have you ever thought about staying out here permanently, not just working, but really making this your home?" "I have no other home to go to. This is my home now." "Good." He said it so quietly she almost missed it. Then he was gone, walking toward the bunkhouse to check on something or other, leaving her alone on the porch with her thoughts spinning. October brought cooler weather and preparations for winter. The ranch became even busier as they moved cattle to lower pastures and stockpiled supplies. Hannah preserved everything she could from the garden, putting up vegetables and fruits to last through the cold months. Frank was everywhere at once, directing operations, solving problems, working alongside his men. One evening, a storm blew in with frightening speed. The sky turned green, then black, and the wind howled like a living thing. Frank came running into the house. "Hannah, get to the cellar. Now. This could be a tornado." "What about you and the men?" "They are heading to the cellar in the bunkhouse. I need to make sure all the animals are secured. Go, now. I will help you." "Hannah, no. You cannot do it alone. It will take too long. I am coming." He looked like he wanted to argue, but another gust of wind slammed into the house, and he grabbed her hand instead. "Stay close to me. If I tell you to run, you run." They fought their way to the barn through wind that nearly knocked them both off their feet. Together, they got the horses into stalls, secured the doors, checked the other buildings. The sky was an ominous black-green, and Hannah could hear a sound like a freight train in the distance. Frank grabbed her hand again and they ran for the house, diving into the cellar just as the full fury of the storm hit. The cellar was small, and they were pressed close together in the darkness. Hannah could hear the storm raging overhead, objects hitting the house, the shriek of wind. Frank's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her against his chest. "It will pass. We are safe down here." She could feel his heart pounding beneath her cheek, matching the rhythm of her own. His arm was solid and warm around her. Despite the terror of the storm, she felt safe in a way she had never experienced before. The storm raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Then, gradually, the sounds diminished. The roar faded to a howl, the howl to a moan, the moan to silence. Frank did not move immediately. Neither did she. They stayed pressed together in the darkness, breathing in sync. Finally, he said, "I think it has passed. Let me check." He moved up the cellar steps carefully and pushed open the door. Daylight, dim and gray, filtered down. He climbed out, then reached down to help her up. The ranch had survived. There was damage, branches and debris everywhere, a section of fence down, but the buildings were intact and no one was hurt. The men emerged from the bunkhouse, everyone talking at once, assessing damage, already planning repairs. Frank organized them quickly, sending groups to check the cattle, repair the fence, clear debris. Hannah went to the kitchen to start preparing food. The men would need hot coffee and a solid meal after that scare. As she worked, she realized her hands were shaking. Not from the storm, but from the memory of being held in Frank's arms, the feeling of belonging somewhere to someone. It was dangerous to feel this way. She was his employee. He was just being protective. It meant nothing, but her heart refused to believe that. November arrived with the first real cold. The men brought in the last of the cattle from the high pastures. Frank worked brutal hours, coming in exhausted every night. Hannah made sure there was always hot food waiting, coffee ready, the house warm. She found herself watching for him, listening for his step on the porch, her day not feeling complete until she saw him safe and well. One evening, he came in later than usual. The men had already eaten and returned to the bunkhouse. Hannah had kept food warm for him, and she served it at the kitchen table, sitting across from him with a cup of coffee while he ate. "You look exhausted," she said quietly. "Long day. Lost 2 steers over a cliff. Had to climb down to make sure they were dead and not suffering. Then had to figure out how to salvage the meat. By the time we got them hauled up and butchered, it was nearly dark. You do too much. It is my job. Your job is foreman, not every single task on this ranch." He smiled tiredly. "You sound like you are worried about me." "I am worried about you. You work yourself to exhaustion every day. What happens if you get hurt or sick? This ranch needs you." "Just the ranch." He said it lightly, but there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Frank, I am sorry. That was inappropriate. You work for me." "I should not." "Should not what?" Her voice was barely a whisper. He pushed his plate away and looked at her directly. "Hannah, I am going to be honest with you because I am too tired to pretend anymore. I have feelings for you, strong feelings. I have tried to ignore them because you are my employee, and I have no right to put you in an uncomfortable position. But every day, I find it harder to keep those feelings to myself. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up, and the last thing I think about before I sleep. When that storm hit and you were in danger, I was more afraid than I have ever been in my life. And when I held you in that cellar, It felt right in a way nothing has felt right in years. Hannah's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. "I have feelings for you too. I have tried not to. I have told myself all the reasons it is foolish, but I cannot help it." Frank stood and came around the table. He offered his hand and she took it, letting him draw her to her feet. They stood close together, his hands holding hers, his gray eyes searching her face. "I am 40 years old. I own nothing but a good horse and a reputation. I can offer you a hard life on a ranch that is not even mine. I have no right to ask you for anything. I am 26 years old. I own nothing but the clothes in my wardrobe and a few dollars saved. I have already chosen a hard life on this ranch. I do not need you to offer me anything except yourself." "Hannah, are you sure? Because once I kiss you, there is no going back. I will court you properly, I will do this right, but I need to know you are sure." "I am sure." He kissed her then, softly at first, then deeper as she responded. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. The kiss was everything she had imagined and more. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I should let you get some sleep," he said, his voice rough. "But I want you to know that I intend to marry you, Hannah Adams. I will court you for as long as propriety requires, but my intentions are completely serious." "Good, because my intentions are serious too." He kissed her again, then forced himself to step back. "I will see you in the morning. Good night, Hannah." "Good night, Frank." She watched him leave, then stood in the kitchen with her hand pressed to her lips, smiling like a fool. She was in love, truly, completely in love. And he loved her back. The next morning at breakfast, Frank announced to the men that he was courting Hannah, and they were to treat her accordingly with even more respect than before. Billy let out a whoop of joy, and the other men grinned and offered congratulations. It seemed their growing feelings for each other had not gone unnoticed. The courtship was sweet and old-fashioned despite the unconventional setting. Frank brought her wildflowers from the prairie. They took walks together in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Texas, learning the cattle business from his father, working his way up from ranch hand to foreman. She told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, her mother's death, the years of service. They shared their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. He kissed her often, always respectfully, always mindful of her reputation. She fell more in love with him each day. He was strong but gentle, tough but kind. He worked hard but never complained. He treated everyone fairly and stood by his word. He made her laugh. He made her feel cherished. He made her feel like she was home. In December, on Christmas Eve, Frank asked her to marry him properly. He took her outside under a sky brilliant with stars, the air so cold their breath formed clouds, and got down on one knee in the snow. "Hannah Adams, you have brought joy and light into my life when I did not even know I needed them. You have made this ranch a home. You have made me a better man. I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Will you marry me?" "Yes. Yes, Frank, I will marry you." He slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. "It was my mother's. It is all I have of her. I hope you do not mind that it is not new. I love it. I love you." They were married in January 1879 in the small church in Coolidge, with the ranch hands serving as witnesses. Hannah wore a simple blue dress she had sewn herself, and Frank wore his best suit. The ceremony was brief. The reception at the ranch was cheerful and boisterous, and their wedding night was everything she had dreamed of and more. Frank was a tender and passionate husband, patient with her inexperience, devoted to her pleasure as well as his own. They made love in the big bed in his room, which was now their room, and fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms. Hannah had never been happier in her life. Married life suited them both. They worked together running the ranch, Hannah managing the household and cooking, Frank managing the land and cattle. They made a good team, their skills complementing each other perfectly. The ranch continued to thrive under their care. Spring brought new challenges. Several of the men left to seek their fortunes elsewhere, and Frank had to hire and train new hands. One of the new hires was a troublemaker from the start, a man named Kurt who resented taking orders and made crude comments when he thought Frank could not hear. Hannah overheard him one day making a disrespectful remark about her, and she told Frank immediately. Frank confronted Kurt that evening in front of all the men. "You have one chance to apologize to my wife and pack your gear. You are done here." Kurt's face reddened with anger. "You are firing me over a joke." "I am firing you for disrespecting Mrs. Waters. I told every man here when they were hired that I expect complete respect for my wife. You agreed to that. You broke that agreement. You have 1 hour to be off this property." Kurt looked like he wanted to argue, maybe even fight, but Frank's stance made it clear that would be a very bad idea. Kurt left, swearing and complaining, but he left. The other men nodded their approval. The incident reinforced what everyone already knew. Frank Waters protected what was his, and Hannah was under his protection completely. In May, Hannah realized she was expecting a child. She told Frank one evening after supper, nervous about how he would react. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, then pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, then immediately set her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "Are you sure? Are you well? Do you need a doctor?" She laughed at his sudden anxiety. "I am sure I am well, and yes, we should probably arrange for a doctor to check on me, but not yet. It is still early. A baby. We are going to have a baby." He sat down heavily, still looking stunned. "Hannah, I am going to be a father. You are going to be a wonderful father." He pulled her onto his lap, holding her carefully. "I am terrified. So am I. We will figure it out together." "Yes, we will." The pregnancy progressed well. Hannah continued her work as long as she could, though Frank became increasingly protective, trying to prevent her from lifting anything heavier than a wooden spoon. The men treated her like she was made of spun glass. Billy appointed himself her personal assistant, doing all the heavy work and hovering anxiously whenever she was on her feet for too long. In late December, during a snowstorm, Hannah went into labor. Frank sent Billy racing to town for the doctor, but the storm was too severe. The doctor could not make it through. Frank was left to deliver his own child with the help of one of the older ranch hands who had experience with birthing cattle, which he assured them was probably not that different. It was the longest night of Frank's life. Hannah labored for hours, and he felt utterly helpless watching her pain. He held her hand, wiped her face with cool cloths, whispered encouragement, and prayed harder than he had ever prayed in his life. Finally, as dawn broke and the storm cleared, their son was born. Frank delivered the baby himself with shaking hands, cutting the cord and wrapping the tiny, wailing infant in clean blankets. He placed the baby in Hannah's arms, and tears streamed down his face as he watched his wife hold their child. "A son," Hannah whispered, exhausted but radiant. "We have a son, Frank. He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for this gift." They named him Frederick Allen Waters after Frank's father and Hannah's mother's maiden name. Freddie, as they quickly began calling him, was a healthy, energetic baby with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determined chin. Frank was besotted from the first moment. He would hold Freddie for hours, talking to him softly, telling him stories about the ranch and the cattle and the wide prairie that would someday be his to roam. Hannah watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love with him. Seeing Frank's tender care for such a tiny, helpless being, hearing him sing lullabies in his deep voice, watching him pace the floor at night when Freddie was fussy. All of it made her grateful beyond words for the day she had walked up to Bar W Ranch and cooked that first meal. The years passed in a blur of hard work, joy, and love. Freddie grew from infant to toddler, learning to walk by holding onto Frank's fingers, learning to talk by mimicking the ranch hands. Hannah became pregnant again when Freddie was 2, and this time she delivered a healthy daughter they named Helen Rose. 2 years after that, another son arrived, small and fierce, whom they named Foster James. The ranch prospered under Frank's management. The owner, increasingly elderly and rarely involved, finally made Frank a partner in 1885, giving him a 50% share in Bar W Ranch. Frank was now a man of property, and the pride in his eyes when he told Hannah was worth more than all the land and cattle combined. "You did this," he told her that night as they lay in bed, their children asleep down the hall. "I was a good foreman before you came, but I was just going through the motions. You gave me a reason to build something, to plan for the future. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose beyond just the next day's work. Everything good in my life came from you. Everything good in my life came from you too. I was lost when I arrived here, running from a life that had crumbled around me. You gave me safety, respect, love. You gave me a home. You gave me a family. We built this life together, Frank." He kissed her deeply. "I love you, Hannah Waters. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. I love you too." They made love tenderly, years of practice and deep knowledge of each other making the intimacy even more profound than it had been at the beginning. Afterward, they lay wrapped together, talking quietly about their plans for the ranch, for their children's futures, for the life they were building together. Freddie announced at age 7 that he was going to be a rancher like his father. Helen declared at age 5 that she was going to have her own horse and learn to rope cattle. Foster, at 3, mostly just followed his older siblings around and tried to do whatever they were doing. Frank taught them all to ride, to respect the animals and the land, to work hard and be honest. Hannah continued to cook for the ranch hands, though she now had help from a young woman named Sarah who had answered an advertisement they placed in town. Sarah was eager to learn and took naturally to the work. With Sarah's help, Hannah had more time to spend with her children, teaching them to read and write, telling them stories, helping them learn about the world beyond the ranch. The ranch hands came and went over the years, but a core group remained, including Billy, who had grown into a capable man and Frank's right hand. Billy eventually married Sarah, and they built a small house on the ranch property. Other marriages followed among the hands, and Bar W Ranch began to feel like a small community rather than just a workplace. In 1888, tragedy struck when a prairie fire swept through the region. Frank and the men fought for 2 days to save the ranch, digging fire breaks, setting back fires, working until they dropped from exhaustion. Hannah kept food and water going out to them, terrified the entire time that she would lose her husband and their home to the flames. In the end, they saved most of the ranch, but they lost some grazing land and several outbuildings. Worse, one of the hands was badly burned and took months to recover. The fire brought the community together. Neighbors who had always been friendly but distant came to help with rebuilding. The town of Coolidge raised money for supplies. Hannah cooked for dozens of people during the Reconstruction period, and Frank worked alongside everyone else, despite his exhaustion. They rebuilt stronger than before, and the bonds forged during those difficult weeks lasted for years. By 1890, Freddie was 12 and working alongside his father regularly. He had Frank's way with animals and his mother's determination. Helen, at 10, was fearless and capable, able to ride as well as any of the hands. Foster, at 8, was the family scholar, always reading when he could and asking questions about everything. Hannah watched her children grow and felt a deep satisfaction. They were good kids, kind and hardworking, with strong values and clear identities. Frank, now 52, had silver in his hair and lines around his eyes, but he was still strong and vital. He had cut back his hours slightly, delegating more to Billy and Freddie, but he still rose before dawn and worked hard every day. He and Hannah still shared a deep love, still laughed together, still made time to sit on the porch in the evenings and talk. "You ever regret it?" Frank asked her one evening as they watched the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. "Coming west, marrying me, choosing this life. Not for one single moment, do you?" "Never. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah. This life we built, our children, this ranch, all of it is more than I ever dreamed of having. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and have to remind myself it is real, that you are really here beside me. I am real. This is real. We made this, Frank, together." He pulled her close and kissed her temple. "Thank you for taking a chance on a rough-edged foreman who barely knew how to talk to a woman. Thank you for taking a chance on a desperate cook who showed up at your door with nothing but determination and a carpetbag." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken and the first stars appear. Their children's voices drifted from inside the house, arguing good-naturedly about something. In the distance, cattle lowed and a horse whinnied, the sounds of home. In 1892, the original owner of Bar W Ranch passed away, leaving his 50% share to Frank in his will. Frank was now sole owner of the ranch that had been his home and workplace for over 20 years. The weight of that responsibility was significant, but Frank shouldered it as he did everything, with quiet competence and determination. He sat Hannah down to discuss their options. "I could sell part or all of it. We could move somewhere more comfortable, a town maybe. You have worked hard all these years, Hannah. You have earned an easier life. Do you want to sell? No, this place is in my blood now, but I want you to be happy." "I am happy right here. This is our home, Frank, our children's home. This ranch represents everything we have built together. I do not want to be anywhere else." "Then we stay. We build it bigger and better. We make it something to pass on to our children and their children." That became their mission for the next several years. They expanded the ranch, buying adjacent properties when they came available. They improved the breeding stock, built better facilities, hired good people, and treated them well. Bar W Ranch became known throughout Kansas as a model operation, and Frank's reputation as a cattleman and businessman grew. Freddie, at 16, decided he wanted to learn more about the business side of ranching. Frank arranged for him to spend time with bankers and lawyers in town, learning about contracts and finance. Helen, at 14, was helping break horses and working with the breeding program. Foster, at 12, had developed an interest in animal medicine and was studying every book he could find on the subject. Hannah watched her children find their paths and felt proud beyond measure. They were good people, all three of them, capable and compassionate. She and Frank had raised them well. In 1895, as Hannah approached her 43rd birthday, she discovered she was pregnant again. The news shocked both of them. They had assumed their family was complete. At her age, pregnancy carried more risks, and Frank was beside himself with worry. But Hannah felt strong and healthy, and the pregnancy progressed well. Their fourth child, a daughter they named Hope Elizabeth, was born in the spring of 1896. She was tiny but fierce, and from the moment she drew her first breath, she had her entire family wrapped around her little finger. Freddie, now 18 and essentially a partner in running the ranch, treated his baby sister like she was made of spun glass. Helen, 16 and usually fearless, became almost absurdly protective. Foster, 14 and already planning to attend veterinary school in a few years, monitored Hope's health with scientific precision. Frank, at 58, was a doting father all over again. He would sit for hours holding Hope, talking to her softly, showing her the world from the safety of his arms. Hannah would watch them together and feel her heart overflow with love. The late 1890s brought changes to Kansas and the West in general. The frontier was closing, towns were growing, the wild days were fading into memory. But Bar W Ranch remained a constant, a place where hard work and integrity still mattered most, where family was everything, where the land was respected and cared for. In 1900, as the new century began, the Waters family gathered for a photograph. Frank and Hannah sat in the center, Hope on Hannah's lap. Freddie stood behind his father, already as tall as Frank and with the same broad shoulders. Helen stood beside her mother, beautiful and strong. Foster stood next to his brother, scholarly and serious. They were a good-looking family, prosperous and happy, rooted in the land they had worked so hard to build. Freddie married in 1901, bringing home a smart, capable young woman named Emma who fit into the family immediately. They built a house on the ranch property and began their own family. Helen married in 1903, choosing a neighboring rancher's son who was as tough and independent as she was. Foster left for veterinary school in 1904 but promised to return and practice in the area. Hope grew into a lively, intelligent child who brought joy to everyone around her. She followed her father everywhere, learning about cattle and horses, asking endless questions. Frank, now in his 60s, had slowed down somewhat but was still actively involved in running the ranch. He and Freddie worked together seamlessly, with Frank providing wisdom and experience while Freddie brought energy and new ideas. Hannah, in her early 50s, had finally allowed Sarah to take over most of the daily cooking for the ranch hands. She still loved to cook and often helped, but she also enjoyed having more time to spend with Frank, with Hope, with the grandchildren who were starting to appear. She had survived and thrived in the West, had built a life and family beyond her wildest dreams. On a warm evening in June 1905, Frank and Hannah sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Hope was inside practicing her piano lessons, filling the house with music. In the distance, they could see Freddie and Emma's house, smoke rising from the chimney. Helen and her husband were visiting for supper, their voices and laughter drifting from the kitchen. 27 years, Frank said quietly. Since the day you walked up that road with your carpetbag and your determination. 27 years since you gambled on a desperate woman who promised she could cook. Best gamble I ever took. You asked me to stay forever after one meal. I knew. The moment I saw those biscuits, I knew you were something special, and when I tasted them, I knew I could not let you leave. I told myself it was about the cooking, but even then, I think some part of me knew it was about more than that. Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder. I knew too. I knew this place would be my home. I knew you would be my future. It scared me and thrilled me in equal measure. Are you happy, Hannah? Truly happy? I am more than happy. I am content. I am fulfilled. I am loved and I love in return. I have a husband who is my partner in everything, children who make me proud, grandchildren who bring joy, a home that is solid and real. I have everything I ever wanted and many things I never knew to want. Yes, Frank, I am happy. He kissed her softly. You made me believe in second chances. I was 38 years old when you arrived, settled into a solitary life, convinced that was my lot. Then you appeared and changed everything. You gave me love, family, purpose, joy. You made me a better man. You were already a good man. I just gave you someone to share your life with." They sat in silence as the sun set, painting the prairie in brilliant colors. The land stretched out around them, familiar and beloved. This ranch, this life, this love, it was all real and solid and permanent. They had built something that would last, something that would continue through their children and grandchildren. Inside the house, Hope finished her piano practice and came running out. "Papa, Mama, come see the new colt. He is standing already." Frank stood and offered his hand to Hannah. She took it and let him pull her to her feet. Together, they followed their daughter to the barn, their hands still clasped, their steps matching. After 27 years, they still moved as one, still supported each other, still chose each other every day. The colt was indeed standing, wobbly but determined, his mother watching over him protectively. Hope climbed onto the stall railing for a better view, and Frank stood behind her to make sure she did not fall. Hannah watched her husband and youngest daughter together, their heads close as they observed the new life before them, and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. This was what she had cooked that meal for all those years ago, not just to earn a job or find a place to stay. She had cooked it to earn her place in this family, in this life, in this man's heart. And he had asked her to stay forever after tasting that one simple meal because somehow, in that moment, they had both recognized that they were meant to find each other. The years continued to pass, bringing the usual mixture of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Frank's health began to decline in his late 60s, his joints stiffening, his energy waning. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Hannah never diminished. She cared for him tenderly as his body betrayed him, and he accepted her care with grace and gratitude. Foster returned from veterinary school in 1908 and established a practice that served ranchers throughout the region. He married a teacher from town and brought her home to meet the family. Hope, at 12, was already showing signs of the beauty and intelligence she would carry into adulthood. In 1910, Frank and Hannah celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary. The whole family gathered at the ranch for a party that lasted 2 days. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, noise and laughter and love filling every corner of the property. Frank, now 72 and moving slowly, sat in a chair on the porch and held court, grandchildren climbing on his lap, his children coming to him for advice and stories. Hannah brought him a plate of food and sat beside him. Quite a crowd, quite a legacy. All because you could make a decent biscuit, she laughed. Is that all I am good for, biscuits? You are good for everything. You are my heart, Hannah, you always have been. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Frank and Hannah lay together in the darkness of their room. Frank's breathing was labored, his body failing him more each day, but his hand found hers beneath the blankets and held tight. "Thank you for a beautiful life," he whispered. "Thank you for loving me. Always. I will love you always." Frank Waters passed away peacefully in his sleep in December 1910, with Hannah lying beside him. He was 72 years old and had lived a full, rich life. The funeral drew people from across Kansas, a testament to the respect and affection he had earned. He was buried on a hill overlooking Bar W Ranch, the land he had loved and served so faithfully. Hannah grieved deeply but did not break. She had known grief before and survived it. She had her children, her grandchildren, her memories. The ranch continued under Freddie's capable management, with Hannah serving as advisor and matriarch. She lived another 20 years, dying peacefully in 1930 at the age of 78, surrounded by the family she and Frank had created. She was buried beside Frank on the hill, and their joint headstone reads simply, Frank Waters, 1838–1910, and Hannah Waters, 1852–1930. Together forever. Below that, someone had added, she cooked one meal. He asked her to stay forever. She said yes. The ranch remained in the Waters family for generations, passing from Freddie to his children to their children. The story of how it all began, of a desperate woman with a carpet bag and a determined foreman who recognized something special when he saw it, became family legend. Every Waters child grew up hearing about how great-grandmother Hannah had walked up the road and cooked one meal that changed everything. How great-grandfather Frank had known in that moment that he wanted her to stay forever. The old house still stood, modernized and updated but structurally the same. The kitchen where Hannah had worked that first frantic hour, transforming chaos into order and earning her place, remained the heart of the home. The bedroom where she and Frank had shared 31 years of marriage, where their children had been conceived and born, where they had laughed and loved and planned their future, was preserved almost as a shrine. And on that hill overlooking the prairie, two graves stood side by side, marked with a simple stone that told a simple story. A woman came looking for work. A man gave her a chance. She cooked one meal. He asked her to stay forever. And together, they built a legacy of love, family, and hard work that lasted far beyond their own years, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary lives begin with the most ordinary of moments. The prairie wind blew constantly across that hill, carrying with it the sound of cattle lowing, children laughing, life continuing in the endless cycle of seasons and generations. The land endured. The family endured. And somewhere in the vast mystery of whatever comes after, Frank and Hannah Waters were together still, their love as permanent and enduring as the land they had worked so hard to build their life upon. Their story was one of courage, determination, and the kind of love that transforms ordinary days into extraordinary lives. It was a story of the West, of hard work and honest values, of building something lasting in an unforgiving landscape. But most of all, it was a story of two people who found each other when they both needed finding, who recognized in a single moment that they were meant to be together, and who spent the rest of their lives proving that first instinct right. Hannah had cooked one meal for the Cowboys on a desperate afternoon in September 1878, hoping only to earn a job that would keep her fed and sheltered. Frank had tasted that meal and known, with the certainty that sometimes strikes without reason or logic, that this woman was meant to stay. Not just for a week or a month or a season, but forever. He had asked, she had accepted, and together they had built forever into something real and solid and beautiful. Their love story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic declarations, though it had its moments of both. It was a love story built on daily choices, on showing up for each other every morning, on working side by side toward common goals, on raising children together and weathering storms together and celebrating victories together. It was a love story that proved the power of partnership, respect, and genuine affection. It was a love story that lasted until death and beyond, echoing through generations, inspiring children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to seek the same kind of lasting, genuine connection. In the end, Bar W Ranch was more than land and cattle and buildings. It was a testament to what two people could build when they committed to each other completely. It was proof that love, real love, could transform not just two lives but dozens, eventually hundreds, as the family grew and spread. It was a reminder that sometimes the most important decisions are made in a moment, with instinct rather than logic, with heart rather than head. Frank had known, tasting those biscuits, that Hannah Adams was special. Hannah had known, watching Frank's face light up with that first real smile that she had found her home. Everything that came after, all the years of love and work and family, all of it flowed from that single moment of recognition and the courage to act on it. Their story became part of Kansas history, part of the lore of the West, part of the collective memory of a time and place where hard work could build empires and love could last forever. School children learned about Bar W. Ranch and the Waters family. Historians documented the ranch's success and Frank's innovations in cattle breeding and land management. But the heart of the story was always the same. She cooked one meal. He asked her to stay forever, and their love became the foundation upon which generations were built. As the 20th century progressed and the West changed beyond recognition, as cars replaced horses and towns grew into cities, and the frontier became history, Bar W. Ranch remained. The Waters family remained. And on that hill with the two graves and the simple stone, the story remained, waiting for anyone who cared to listen to hear about a love that began with a single meal and lasted beyond a single lifetime, proving that sometimes, if you are very lucky, forever is not just a word but a promise that can actually be kept.